You know that really sharp feeling, disappointment, maybe even, well, anger, when you find out someone you looked up to, someone in authority, is basically living a lie.
Oh, absolutely. When their public image just completely shatters because it was all just a performance.
Exactly. Designed purely for applause. It's that gap between the outward show and the inward reality.
It's the essence of hypocrisy, really. And while it's been talked about forever, few have condemned it, quite like Jesus Christ did, especially near the end of his public ministry.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're focusing on, well, arguably the Bible's most intense teaching on this, Matthew chapter 23.
This is where Jesus has his final major public showdown with the religious leaders of his day.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
It really is. So our mission today is to walk through this chapter verse by verse, really unpack it. We want to pull out the lessons on, authenticity, leadership, what faith really looks like according to Jesus.
Right.
And we'll be quoting the scripture references fully as we go.
And the context is so important here. Before we jump into chapter 23, you have to remember what just happened in Matthew 21 and 22.
Right. Lots of debates, confrontations.
Exactly. Jesus was in these intense back and forths with the chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees. They kept trying to trap him with tricky questions about taxes, authority, the resurrection.
And they failed every time.
They did. So chapter 23 is a major shift. Jesus stops debating with them and starts talking about them. He turns to the crowds, to his own disciples, and basically delivers this public expose.
He calls them out.
He absolutely calls them out on their failures, their legalism. He's teaching everyone, look, this is what bad leadership looks like. Don't be like this.
Okay, so Jesus begins, maybe surprisingly, by acknowledging their official position, their authority. Why start there before, launching into the criticism?
It's a really smart move, actually. He draws a sharp line between the office and the person holding it. He needs to acknowledge the established system first. So he starts by addressing the audience, Matthew 23.1. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples.
Okay, setting the scene. Then he brings in the scribes and Pharisees, Matt 23.2, saying the scribes and Pharisees sit upon the seat of Moses.
Yeah, the seat of Moses. This wasn't necessarily always a literal chair, though some synagogues might have had one. It's more figurative.
Signifying their role.
Exactly. It signifies their official authority to interpret and teach the law of Moses. They were seen as the successors, the ones carrying on Moses' teaching tradition. And Jesus, he accepts the legitimacy of that role, that function.
Because they were teaching the scriptures fundamentally.
Yes. The teaching itself, drawn for the law, should be respected. But that leads right into the big problem, the paradox he highlights next.
The clash between their words and their actions.
Precisely. He tells the people, listen to the law they teach, but do not copy their behavior.
Yeah.
23.3. Therefore, all things, whatever they say to you, do and keep, but do not do according to their works. For they say, but do not do.
Wow. They say, but do not do. It's so simple, but so damning. They preach one thing, live another. Basically, follow the instructions, ignore the instructor's example.
And it wasn't just, general hypocrisy. It showed up specifically in how they applied the law, especially all the extra rules they added.
Legalism. Which brings us to verse 4, the heavy burdens.
Right. This shows the stark contrast between their demands and their lack of actual care or compassion. They piled on the rules but offered no help.
Matt 23.4. For they tie up heavy loads that are hard to carry and place them upon the shoulders of men, but they themselves are not willing to lift their finger to move them.
These heavy loads, that's all the extra biblical traditions, the incredibly detailed rules about everything, hand washing, Sabbath day activities, things that went way beyond the original law.
Making it almost impossible for ordinary people to keep up.
Absolutely. A farmer, a laborer, how could they possibly meet these endless demands? And the irony, the sheer hypocrisy, is that the very people who created this system, the scribes and Pharisees, wouldn't lift a finger, as Jesus says, to help anyone carry that weight.
They demanded perfection but offered zero grace, zero assistance.
It's striking, isn't it? Jesus saves his harshest critique not for, say, the Roman occupiers, but for the religious leaders. It suggests that for him, this kind of institutional hypocrisy was the biggest spiritual danger.
So what's the takeaway for leadership today, then?
Well, it's pretty direct. Real spiritual leadership should lighten loads, not add to them. Think about what Jesus says elsewhere, back in Matthew 11.
Come to me, all you who labor.
Exactly. And are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. It's the complete opposite of the Pharisees.
Their yoke was heavy, crushing. His is easy.
So any religious system or leader that puts human rules above human well-being or demands strict adherence without offering compassion and help, well, it's echoing that same Pharisaical error Jesus condemned so strongly. Okay, so after establishing their lack of compassion, Jesus digs deeper.
Yeah.
He asks why.
Mm-hmm.
Why create these burdens? Why the meticulous rule following? And the answer? It was all a performance.
Right. All for show. Verse 5 gets really specific about how they manufactured this pious image. Matt, 23.5, for they perform all their works to be seen of people, for they make the phylacteries wide and the tassels of their garments long.
Yeah, let's break that down. Phylacteries, or tefillin in Hebrew, were these little leather boxes. They held tiny scrolls with scripture passages inside.
Worn on the arm and forehead.
During prayer, yes, as a reminder of the law. And the practice itself wasn't the problem.
But they exaggerated it.
Exactly. They made their phylacteries wide, bigger, more noticeable than they needed to be. It was like a flashing sign saying, look how devout I am.
Very conspicuous.
And the same thing with the tassels that sits it. The law required tassels on the corners of garments to remind them of God's commandments. Again, the Pharisees made theirs excessively long.
More visible piety. It sounds like a kind of religious one-upmanship.
That's a good way to put it. Who looks the most religious? Whose accessories shout, holy the loudest? It wasn't about God. It was about getting noticed, getting praised by people. Spiritual advertising.
And this desire for recognition didn't stop with accessories. It bled into social status, titles.
Oh, absolutely. They craved public honor.
Yeah.
It shows a deep insecurity, really, covered up by all this outward display. Man, 23.6 Thason, for they love the chief place at the banquets and the first seats in the synagogues, and the greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called rabbi by people.
Okay, so the chief place at dinner, the first seats in the synagogue, these were the spots for the VIPs, right?
Definitely. The seats of honor, facing the congregation in the synagogue, close to the host at a banquet, status symbols. And being called rabbi, which means my master, or my great one, that was the ultimate nod to their perceived superiority.
They loved being deferred to.
Which is precisely why Jesus then turns to his own followers and sets a completely different standard. He calls them to humility, unity, and reliance only on God, not on human titles or status.
He tells them not to seek those titles. Which raises a question, doesn't it? How literally should we take that today? Like, the prohibition against calling someone rabbi or father, does that apply to, say, job titles or academic titles?
That's a really important clarification. Jesus isn't necessarily condemning, functional titles like manager or professor or even pastor in a descriptive sense. He's attacking the spirit behind seeking and using these titles, especially religious ones, to gain personal honor, create hierarchies, and wield undue authority over others.
So it's about preventing people from replacing God or Christ as the ultimate source of spiritual authority.
Exactly. His focus is on the community of disciples being brothers, equals under God. He starts with rabbi.
Matt, 23.8. But you yourselves do not be called rabbi, for there is one teacher for you, and you are all brothers.
See that emphasis. You yourselves. You, my followers, need to be different. There's only one real teacher ultimately, Jesus himself, so everyone else is on the same level. Brothers.
And he applies the same principle to father. Matt, come 3.9. And do not call anyone your father on the earth, for one is your father, he who is in heaven.
Again, father here isn't about biological fathers. It's a title of spiritual honor, suggesting someone is the source of doctrine or authority. Jesus says, nope, that title, that level of ultimate spiritual parentage belongs only to God in heaven. Don't give it to men.
He rounds it out by repeating the main point about teachers, Matt 23.10, and do not be called teachers, because one is your teacher, the Christ.
So the disciples are to completely reject that whole status-seeking game. True greatness, Jesus insists, isn't found in titles or prime seating. It's found in the exact opposite direction.
Servanthood.
Yes. That's the kingdom standard. It flips the world's hierarchy completely upside down.
Matt 23.11. And he who is greatest among you will be your servant.
The one who wants to be top needs to act like the bottom. It's consistent with what he taught elsewhere, like in Matthew 20. Real disciples serve. They don't lord it over others.
And if you reject this, if you try to lift yourself up,
then you face the inevitable consequence. God opposes the proud.
Matt 23.11. And whoever will exalt himself will be humbled, and whoever will humble himself will be exalted.
And that's the practical takeaway, isn't it? The path to honor in God's eyes is through humility. The moment you start chasing human approval, like the Pharisees did, you've lost the plot. Humble yourself, serve others, That's the way up in the kingdom.
Okay, now the tone shifts dramatically. Jesus moves from describing their hypocrisy to pronouncing judgment on it. He launches into the 7 woes. Tell us about this word, woe. It sounds pretty severe.
It is severe. The Greek word "way" is the polar opposite of a beatitude, like in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are. A woe is an expression of deep grief, pain, and condemnation. It signals that judgment is coming.
And he directs these woes straight at the scribes and Pharisees, calling them hypocrites.
Repeatedly. Hypocrite means an actor, a fraud, someone playing a part, a deceiver. He's not mincing words.
Okay, let's look at the first woe in verse 13. It's about shutting the door to the kingdom. Matt 23.13. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you are shutting up the kingdom of heaven before humankind. For you yourselves are not entering in, nor are you permitting the ones coming in to enter.
Think about that charge. Their very job was to guide people to God, to the kingdom. But Jesus says they were actually blocking the entrance.
How? Through their teachings?
Yes,
No.
primarily through their burdensome works-based legalism. They made entering the kingdom seem dependent on perfectly keeping hundreds of minute rules they couldn't even keep themselves. So the real way in, through faith, repentance, God's grace, got completely obscured.
So they weren't just lost themselves, they were actively preventing others from finding the way, like gatekeepers locking the gate.
Exactly. They failed catastrophically in their role. As Luke's gospel puts it in a parallel passage, they had taken away the key of knowledge. They hid the simple truth behind layers of complex, self-serving regulations.
Now, some manuscripts include a verse 14 here about devouring widows' houses, but most scholars focus on verse 15 as the second woe, and this one is about their missionary work, surprisingly.
Yes, woe number 2, creating sons of hell. It sounds shocking, but Jesus condemns their zealous efforts to make converts. Matt 23.15, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel over the land and the sea to win one convert, and when it happens, you have made him the twofold son of Gehenna as yourselves.
Okay, wait. Making converts, sharing faith, isn't that generally seen as a good thing? Why is Jesus condemning this?
He's not condemning the act of conversion itself. The problem was the content of their conversion. What were they converting people to?
Not to genuine faith in God?
No. They were converting people to their own brand of harsh, hypocritical legalism. And often, the convert, trying to prove their newfound commitment, would become even more extreme, more zealous in the rule-keeping than their teachers.
That's what twofold son of Gehenna means. Twice as bad.
Exactly. Twice as devoted to the wrong things, twice as far from God's grace. Gehenna, remember, was the Valley of Hinnom near Jerusalem, a place associated with fire and judgment, basically, a symbol for hell or ultimate destruction.
So they'd travel everywhere, over land and sea, working hard to make converts, only to lead them into spiritual ruin, making them even more fit for judgment than they were themselves.
It's a devastating critique of misguided religious zeal. Their efforts, lacking true grace and mercy, actually multiplied spiritual harm.
Moving on to the third woe, this one tackles their tricky arguments about oaths and promises. Jesus calls them blind guides. Why blind?
Because they were completely missing the point about integrity. They were obsessed with creating loopholes, finding clever ways to distinguish between oaths that were binding and oaths that weren't, so they could break their word without feeling guilty.
The hypocrisy of the fine print.
Precisely. They cared more about the technicalities of the oath than the simple morality of keeping a promise. Look at the first example he gives. Matt 23.66. Woe to you, blind guides, the ones who say, whoever will swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever will swear by the gold in the temple, he is obligated to perform it.
Okay, that sounds completely backward. Swearing by the gold in the temple is binding, but swearing by the temple itself isn't.
It's absurd, right? Their reasoning, likely, was that the gold, once dedicated, was permanently sacred, while the physical building might be, repaired or changed. But it reveals a mindset that values the material offering more than the sacred space it occupies.
Prioritizing money over God's house.
Essentially, it's the kind of hair-splitting logic designed purely to get out of commitments. So Jesus uses their own method, a sharp question, to expose how foolish it is. Matt 23.17, fools and blind ones. For what is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold?
The answer is obvious. The temple makes the gold holy, not the other way around.
Of course. The container is greater than the contained in this sense. The The place of holiness is greater than the gift within it. They had it completely upside down.
And he uses the same logic for the altar and the gifts offered on it?
Yes, same flawed reasoning they apparently used. Matthew 23.1 And whoever will swear by the altar, it is nothing, but whoever will swear by the gift that is upon the altar, he is obligated to perform it.
So swearing by the offering is binding, but swearing by the altar itself is not.
According to their twisted logic, yes. Again, focusing on the temporary gift rather than the permanently sacred altar.
23.1 You blind ones, which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift?
The altar sanctifies the gift. It's just common sense, which they'd abandoned in favor of self-serving technicalities. Their whole system was built on finding ways to wiggle out of promises.
So Jesus lays down the correct principle. You can't divide these things. An oath involves the whole context.
Exactly. He says if you swear by a part, you're swearing by the whole thing it represents and ultimately by God who makes it holy.
Math 23.20 Therefore, he who swears by the altar is swearing by it and by everything that is on it.
The altar represents the entire system of worship and sacrifice established by God. Swear by it, you swear by all of it. Matt 23.21 And he who swears by the temple is swearing by it, and by the one who is dwelling in it.
Swearing by the temple means swearing by God whose presence dwells there.
Right. You can't separate the symbol from the reality it points to.
22.22 And he who swears by heaven is swearing by the throne of God and by the one sitting upon it.
The bottom line is clear. All oaths, all promises, are ultimately made before God. There are no clever loopholes to justify dishonesty. Trying to find them just reveals your own spiritual blindness. Your word should just be your word.
Okay, this next group of woes 4, 5, and 6 really hits the core issue, focusing on tiny external details while completely ignoring the heart of the matter, the internal reality. Let's start with row 4, the famous one about tithing.
Yeah, this perfectly illustrates their skewed priorities. They were like meticulous accountants for trivial things, but morally bankrupt when it came to what truly mattered. Matt 23.23 Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you pay a tenth of the mint, dill, and cumin, and you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, judgment, and mercy and faith. These things are necessary to do while not neglecting the others.
Mint, dill, and cumin. These are just small garden herbs, right? Like spices.
Tiny things. The law required tithing on major agricultural produce, grain, wine, oil.
Yeah.
But the Pharisees, wanting to show how incredibly righteous they were, extended this to every little herb grown in a window box.
So they're counting out seeds, basically, to make sure they give exactly 1/10.
Probably. Very meticulous. And notice Jesus doesn't actually say stop tithing herbs. He says these things are necessary to do, implying that careful obedience isn't bad in itself, while not neglecting the others. The problem was their proportion.
They focused on the tiny details and missed the big picture. What are these weightier matters? Judgment, mercy, and faith.
They represent the core spirit of God's law. Judgment here means justice, fairness, treating people rightly. Mercy is compassion, kindness, especially to the vulnerable. And faith means faithfulness, loyalty, trusting in God, not just following rules.
Things the Old Testament prophets were always talking about.
Constantly. Think of Micah 6.8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? That's the essence. The Pharisees might have tithed their herbs perfectly, but they were unjust, unmerciful, and ultimately trusted their own performance, not God.
Which leads Jesus to that incredible, almost darkly funny comparison. Matt 23.24 You blind guides, you strain out the gnat but swallow the entire camel.
It's brilliant hyperbole. A gnat was the smallest unclean insect according to Jewish law. They'd carefully filter their wine to make sure they didn't accidentally swallow one and become ritually impure.
Okay, meticulous filtering.
But then they metaphorically swallow a camel, the largest unclean animal. They obsessed over tiny ritual purity issues while gulping down huge moral failures like injustice, pride, and greed.
It's such a vivid picture of misplaced priorities. You strain at the little things and ignore the massive problems. You see that today too, don't you?
All the time. People or organizations getting hyper-focused on minor compliance points, ticking boxes while ignoring huge ethical issues right under their noses, straining gnats, swallowing camels.
Okay, woe number 5 keeps this inside-outside theme going, using the image of a cup and dish. Matt 23.25 Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence.
The Pharisees had incredibly detailed rules about ritually washing cups and plates. So outwardly, their tableware was spotless, gleamingly clean.
Looked perfect.
But Jesus says the inside representing their hearts, their inner lives, was filthy, full of greed, probably ill-gotten gains, and self-indulgence or lack of self-control. The outward purity was just a mask for inner corruption.
And the solution Jesus gives is direct, and he switches to address them individually here, doesn't he? You blind Pharisee.
Yes, he makes it personal. The fix isn't more external scrubbing. Nat 23.26, you blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and the dish in order that the outside may also be clean.
Start with the heart, deal with the greed, the selfishness, the inner motivations first.
Exactly. If the inside is clean, the outside will naturally become clean too. True righteousness flows from the inside out. Focusing only on the outside is just performance.
Which sets up the final woe in this group, Woe 6. This is maybe the most striking image of all. The whitewashed tombs. Matt, 23.27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of bones of dead men and all uncleanness.
This is powerful imagery. In that time and place, touching a tomb or a dead body made a person ceremonially unclean. So especially before big festivals when crowds came to Jerusalem, tombs near pathways were whitewashed.
To make them highly visible.
Yes, bright white, so people wouldn't accidentally bump into them and become defiled. They looked clean, pristine, even beautiful from a distance.
Now inside.
Inside was death. Bones, decay, corruption, uncleanness. The beautiful exterior hid a horrifying reality.
And that's his metaphor for the Pharisees, Matt, 23.28. In the same way, on the outside you appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness.
They look like the pillars of righteousness, perfect exteriors. But inwardly, Jesus says, they were spiritually dead, full of deceit and rebellion against God's true law. Their outward piety wasn't just fake, it was dangerously deceptive, hiding deadly corruption.
So we reach the seventh and final woe. This one feels different. It brings history into it, linking their current actions to the past and warning about the future consequences.
Right, this woe connects their present hypocrisy to Israel's long, tragic history of rejecting God's messengers. And Jesus essentially says, you're about to do it again, and this time the bill comes due for all of it. Matt 23.29, a woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous.
So they're honoring the memory of the prophets from long ago, building fancy monuments for them.
Exactly. Making a big show of respecting these dead messengers of God. And they even claim they would have acted differently if they'd been alive back then.
Matt, 23.30. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers in the shedding of the blood of the prophets.
Big words. Oh, we wouldn't have done what our ancestors did. But Jesus immediately exposes the devastating irony.
While they're busy decorating tombs, they're plotting to kill the greatest prophet of all, Jesus himself.
Precisely. By claiming piety towards the victims while repeating the actions of the murderers, they're actually proving whose spiritual children they truly are. Matt 23.31, so that you are testifying against yourselves that you are the descendants of the ones who murdered the prophets.
Wow. Their actions condemn them. They are heirs to the legacy of ejection. Which leads to this really chilling, almost sarcastic command from Jesus. Matt, 23.32. You yourselves, then, fill up the measure of your fathers.
It's thick with irony, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, go ahead, finish the job your ancestors started. He knows they're on the verge of arresting and killing him, the Messiah. That act will fill up the measure of rebellion, bringing judgment down on their generation.
And the language gets even stronger. He echoes John the Baptist's earlier condemnation. Matt, 23.33. Snakes, offspring of vipers, how will you escape the judgment of Gehenna?
Offspring of vipers. Poisonous, deceitful, dangerous. John the Baptist used that phrase too back in Matthew 3. Jesus is confirming, your outward religious show won't save you from the coming judgment, from Gehenna, from hell.
And Jesus predicts that this pattern of rejecting God's messengers will continue even after him with his own followers. Matt 23.34. Because of this, behold, I myself am sending you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and others you will flog in your synagogues and will persecute from town to town.
He's warning them and preparing his disciples that the same spirit of rejection they show towards him, they will also show towards those he sends out later. The book of Acts shows this playing out exactly.
And because they're about to commit the ultimate act of rejection, they will bear the historical weight of all previous rejections. Matt 23.305. So that there will come upon you all the righteous blood that had been shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Barachiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar.
This is a staggering statement. He holds their generation accountable for the blood of every righteous person rejected throughout history. from Abel, the first martyr in Genesis.
To Zechariah, often seen as the last martyr recorded in the Old Testament historical order.
Right, likely referencing Zechariah in 2 Chronicles. He's saying their actions are the culmination of this entire history of rebellion, and the judgment for it all is coming upon them.
And it's not some far-off thing. He makes it immediate, Matt. 23.36. For truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation.
He's pointing towards a near-term catastrophic judgment. Most scholars see this fulfilled in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Romans in AD 70, an event within the lifetime of many who heard him speak these words. Their rejection had immediate, devastating consequences.
After delivering arguably the harshest condemnation found anywhere in the Gospels, the tone shifts again, completely, becomes deeply personal, sorrowful.
It really does. We get this incredible glimpse into Jesus' heart. He's not just angry, he's heartbroken. He laments over Jerusalem, the city that represents the nation and its history of rejecting God. Matthew 23.37, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones the ones sent to her, how many times I desired to gather your children together in the same manner as a hen gathers together her brood under her wings, but you were not willing.
That image of a hen gathering her chicks, it's so tender, so protective.
It really is. It speaks of God's longing desire throughout history and in the person of Jesus to protect, shelter, and care for his people. He wanted to gather them safely.
But then that devastating final phrase, but you were not willing.
That's the crux of it. The tragedy isn't God's unwillingness, it's human unwillingness. They chose rejection.
Yeah.
They refused the offered protection, and that choice seals their fate.
Responsibility rests squarely on them.
Yes. Their rejection leads directly to the consequence he announces next, desolation, particularly for the temple, the symbol of their religious life.
23.38, behold, your house is left to you desolate.
Your house, referring primarily to the temple, but perhaps also the city, the nation. It's being left desolate, empty, abandoned by God's protective presence because of their persistent rebellion, culminating in rejecting the Messiah. Judgment is now inevitable.
It sounds so final, but then the very last verse offers a sliver of future hope, doesn't it? A condition for seeing him again. Matt, 23.39, for I say to you, you will not see me again from now until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
Yes, even amidst judgment, there's a hint of eventual restoration. He's saying his physical presence is departing, and they won't see him again in that way until a future time when they finally recognize and welcome him as Messiah, quoting Psalm 118, a psalm used during festival processions.
So it points towards a future repentance and his second coming.
Exactly. While judgment is certain for that generation because of their rejection, the door isn't permanently slammed shut for the nation in the long run. There's a future hope tied to their eventual acceptance of him. #outro.
So wrapping this up, Matthew 23 really lays out two starkly different paths, doesn't it? You've got the path of the scribes and Pharisees.
Right, all about exalting yourself, piling burdens on others, focusing entirely on the outward appearance of religion, the performance. And Jesus makes it clear that path leads straight to judgment, to spiritual emptiness.
And then there's the contrasting path he calls his disciples to.
The way of humility, of serving others, of focusing on cleaning up the inside, first the heart, the motivations, prioritizing what he called the weightier matters.
Justice, mercy, faith.
Exactly. That's the path of genuine righteousness, the one God values.
I think the biggest takeaway for anyone listening, for you engaging with this today, has to be that God looks at the heart. The internal reality, the spirit behind our actions, matters infinitely more to him than just nailing the outward religious checklist perfectly.
It's really sobering. Remember, Jesus reserved his most blistering critique, not for the obvious sinners, the outcasts, but for the religious elite, the ones who looked the most devout.
Which really pushes us to examine ourselves, doesn't it?
It has to. So here's maybe a final thought to chew on, something provocative based on what we've discussed. If the Pharisees got condemned for meticulously tithing tiny herbs, straining the gnat, while ignoring justice and mercy, swallowing the camel, what are our modern versions of that?
What are the little visible things we obsess over in our religious lives or communities today? Maybe it's perfect attendance or saying all the right things online or, I don't know, ticking certain boxes.
While maybe neglecting the much harder, messier work of actually pursuing justice for the oppressed, showing real mercy to those who failed, or building genuine trusting faith. What are our modern phylacteries, the things we puff up to look good for others.
Instead of doing the hard work of cleaning the inside of the cup, dealing with our own pride, our own greed, our own lack of compassion.
Exactly. The tough lesson from Matthew 23 is that hypocrisy often looks incredibly respectable on the outside. We need to constantly ask, are we focused on the whitewash or on what's truly inside? Go examine the inside of your cup.